In January 1938, Werner von Blomberg, the 60-year-old defense minister of Nazi Germany, appeared to be at the height of his career. Less than 2 years earlier, Adolf Hitler, the German Reich Chancellor, had promoted him to the rank of Field Marshal, the first under the Third Reich, in recognition of his role in rebuilding Germany's armed forces for the Nazi state. Yet his position as both military leader and trusted advisor to the Führer collapsed suddenly when embarrassing revelations about his recent marriage came to light. Blomberg's ascent within the Third Reich had begun in 1932, when Chancellor Heinrich Brüning requested that Defense Minister Wilhelm Groener remove Lieutenant General Blomberg from his post in East Prussia. Shortly thereafter, Blomberg was appointed head of the German military delegation to the International Disarmament Conference in Geneva, a role that granted him direct contact with President Paul von Hindenburg. During this period, Blomberg spoke candidly to the head of state about his opposition to the Chancellor's disarmament policies. Brüning's government fell in June and was succeeded first by Franz von Papen and then by Major General Kurt von Schleicher. On January 29, 1933, Blomberg was summoned from Switzerland to Berlin by presidential order in an effort to prevent a possible army coup. By accepting Hindenburg's offer to serve as defense minister in Hitler's first cabinet in 1933, Blomberg effectively secured the establishment of Nazi rule. His actions thwarted an army conspiracy to abduct the president and carry out a military takeover, which would have blocked Hitler's accession to power within a coalition government. Blomberg and Hitler generally maintained a good working relationship, despite a major confrontation in June 1934 over whether the Führer was prepared to rein in his own 2 million-strong stormtrooper formations. Their commander, Ernst Röhm, head of the Sturmabteilungen, openly sought control of the regular army. An agreement was ultimately reached. Hitler would eliminate Röhm and his associates before the army acted, and in exchange he would succeed Hindenburg as president upon the latter's death. Both sides fulfilled this arrangement in the summer of 1934. Hindenburg died on August 1st, and Hitler was proclaimed head of the German state the following day. On Heroes' Memorial Day in March 1935, Hitler publicly declared that he would disregard the Versailles Treaty, imposed on Republican Germany in 1919, and began an immediate expansion of the German armed forces. The following year, against Blomberg's advice, the Führer ordered German troops to reoccupy the demilitarized Rhineland along the French border. Several weeks later, on April 20, 1936, his 47th birthday, Hitler presented the tall and striking general with a field marshal's baton, elevating Blomberg to the most powerful peacetime military commander in German history. The promotion implicitly recognized the effectiveness of their collaboration in strengthening Germany's armed forces, particularly in establishing the new armored units and rebuilding the Luftwaffe. Although Blomberg cultivated a stern image with others, his readiness to accommodate Hitler's demands earned him the unflattering nickname, the Rubber Lion, among his rivals. Another strain in their relationship emerged in July 1937, when Hitler decided to dispatch German volunteers to support Francisco Franco in the Spanish Civil War, a policy Blomberg again opposed. Matters came to a head on November 5, 1937, when Hitler convened a highly secret meeting of senior military leaders at the Old Reich Chancellery in Berlin and revealed his intention to plunge Germany into a major European war no later than 1943. Blomberg objected, arguing that the Third Reich was unprepared to confront France and Britain, much less the Soviet Union. Once more, Hitler reacted angrily to the reservations of the man he had elevated to Field Marshal. At the same time, Blomberg faced personal challenges unrelated to Hitler's displeasure. In 1931, he had sustained a severe concussion in a riding accident. Historian Samuel W. Mitchum Jr. has suggested that this injury, combined with the death of Blomberg's first wife, may have contributed to increasing emotional instability. Charlotte von Blomberg, his wife of 28 years, died in 1932. 6 years later, in January 1938, Blomberg requested Hitler's approval to remarry. The episode was later described by Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the German High Command, and Blomberg's former subordinate, who wrote about it from his prison cell in Nuremberg in October 1946 as he awaited execution for war crimes. I learned from his adjutants that the wedding, a purely civil ceremony, was to be conducted very discreetly around mid-January in a hall of the War Ministry building, and that Hitler and Hermann Goering had agreed to attend as witnesses, Keitel recalled. I myself was not invited to the ceremony, which was not followed by any church service. Keitel continued. Toward the end of the month, the Berlin chief of police, Count Wolf Heinrich Graf von Helldorf, came to see me in my office after urgently requesting an appointment. He was visibly upset and immediately began questioning me about the appearance of the young bride. At last, he removed from his pocket a change of address registration card bearing a passport-style photograph of a certain Fräulein Erna Grün. The police card recorded her move to Blomberg's apartment in the Ministry building on Tierpitzufer and had been forwarded from her local police station. The Fräulein Erna Grün, who had registered under her new name as Blomberg's wife, was in fact known to the police for moral offenses. It would be improper to go into further detail, though I was able to read the particulars myself on her record. The field marshal's wife was, in truth, a convicted prostitute. She had long been monitored by the morals squad before obtaining her clerical position at the War Ministry. Worse still, her mother was a well-known prostitute and brothel keeper who ran a bordello masquerading as a massage establishment in a Berlin suburb. Erna had effectively learned the trade from her mother. What made the affair even more scandalous was that, beyond prostitution, which at least took place privately, Erna had also posed for pornographic photographs, making her disgrace a public one. These images had been widely distributed and sold, with the result that hundreds of Berliners owned photographs depicting the war minister's wife in a variety of obscene and shameless poses. The records further showed that she had been arrested in connection with these photographs and brought before a court. She testified that her lover and photographic partner, reportedly a 41-year-old Czech Jew, had disappeared, leaving her with only 60 marks from the proceeds. The court, showing sympathy, imposed a relatively mild sentence. Keitel forwarded Count von Helldorf and the incriminating file to Hermann Göring, Blomberg's principal rival, who not only coveted the field marshal's baton, but deeply resented being subordinate to him in the official chain of command. Ironically, Blomberg himself, fully aware of Göring's ambitions, had earlier confided to him that Erna was a child of the people, to which Göring replied that such origins posed no barrier to marriage in the Nazi state. There had also been another lover to remove, possibly the Czech Jew, but Göring had arranged employment for him in South America, along with passage there. Now a furious Göring examined the Helldorf dossier and carried it straight to an equally outraged Hitler. The marriage had taken place on Göring's own birthday, January 12, 1938, and both men believed they had been manipulated by the field marshal. Blomberg had succeeded in marrying Erna while retaining his office, his baton, his official apartment, and even his private railway car, which he had used only once to visit Fräulein Grün at Oberhof in late 1937. Göring confronted Blomberg with Hitler's demand that the marriage be annulled, but the field marshal refused to comply. As Keitel later wrote in his memoirs, he explained to me afterward that he was deeply in love with his wife and claimed that if Hitler and Göring had truly wished to support him, he could have held firm to the position he had taken in the matter. The reality, however, was that neither Hitler nor Göring accepted Blomberg's claims that he had entered into this affair innocently. Both men were furious at having been used as witnesses at his wedding, and were convinced that Blomberg had deliberately placed them in that position in order to force them to suppress and silence any rumors or consequences arising from the marriage. He was utterly broken and close to physical collapse. He again told the Führer that he was unwilling to annul the marriage, and their lengthy discussion concluded with his resignation. Later, Blomberg confided to me that he placed the blame entirely on Göring. Had Göring not been harboring ambitions of succeeding him, Blomberg believed the whole matter could easily have been concealed beneath the guise of genuine love. He admitted that he had always known his wife had lived a morally loose life in the past, but argued that this did not justify condemning a woman for the rest of her life. In any case, she had for some time been employed by the Reichsegg Marketing Board and earned her own living, while her mother, he insisted, was merely an ironing woman. Beyond his duplicity in concealing the affair, one must ask whether the field marshal was also remarkably naive. After all, only 2 years earlier King Edward VIII had relinquished the British throne for the sake of a controversial marriage, and Blomberg himself had served as the Führer's representative at the coronation of King George VI. That episode alone should have alerted him to the grave political consequences such a union could entail. The response of Blomberg's fellow officers was captured succinctly in the private diary of then-Colonel Alfred Jodl. What power a woman can exercise over the fate of a nation without even realizing it. One feels as though one is witnessing a decisive moment for the German people. The situation surrounding the Field Marshal's wife affects the entire upper leadership of the Wehrmacht. It is intolerable that the highest-ranking soldier should marry a whore. He must be compelled either to divorce the woman or be struck from the officers' rolls. He could no longer command even a regiment. In his memoirs, Keitel wrote of his former superior, "I had always known how thick-headed and stubborn he could be once he had committed himself to a course of action," though he later conceded that Blomberg may have been correct in his assessment of Göring. Göring told me that he had been aware of Blomberg's marriage plans well in advance. In the meantime, Göring had gathered every detail concerning the woman's earlier character and relayed it all to me. Blomberg attempted to brazen his way through the scandal, but Göring, apparently furious over the affair, called his bluff. Whether Hitler was genuinely offended or merely feigned outrage mattered little, as the resulting developments served his broader ambitions. Hitler assumed control of the war ministry himself, renamed it the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, and installed Keitel as his deputy. Göring was promoted to Field Marshal, though within the Luftwaffe rather than the army in which he had held general rank for 4 years. Soon afterward, the army's commander-in-chief was forced out, followed by the foreign minister, and both the armed forces and the diplomatic corps were reorganized in preparation for the coming war. Hitler assured Blomberg that he would be recalled to active service once war broke out, a promise that was never fulfilled. Nevertheless, Blomberg continued to receive his full salary for the duration of the Third Reich, and during the euphoric period of 1940, Hitler publicly acknowledged the debt he owed to the organizational talents of the man once derisively nicknamed the Rubber Lion. While on a lavish, Führer-funded honeymoon that took him around the world, Blomberg was at one point offered a pistol by a German naval officer, who suggested that he use it to take his own life. Blomberg refused and survived the conflict, later appearing as a witness before the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Werner von Blomberg died of cancer on March 14, 1946, at the age of 67. He was initially buried in an unmarked grave at the Nuremberg prison, though his remains were later exhumed and reinterred near his Bavarian home. Erna Grun von Blomberg, for her part, passed a state examination in 1952 to qualify as a masseuse and announced plans to assume control of her mother's massage parlor.